This is Daniel Poppy, host of How to Write Good. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hey, it's Baxter Colburn here from Public House Media. Did you know that we just added a store here at Public House Media? No, I'm not talking about a grocery store where you can go buy apples or bananas or peanut butter, which are all fantastic, especially when peanut butter's on all of those. Anyway, we've added a store here at Public House Media so you can not only come and represent your favorite podcast network, but also represent your favorite shows as well, too. Just go over to thephmedia.com and look in the top right corner where you'll see the button that says Store. Click on that and you can search through all of our great products. Or if you go to our Facebook page, Public House Media, you can see on the left-hand side a tab that says Store. All of our products are listed there as well too. It's the new Public House Media store. You don't want to miss it. It is fantastic. Buy some of that great swag to support your favorite shows and to support Public House Media. Check it out today.
This is Sam Kirby, host of Cinema Stories here on Public House Media. Thank you for tuning into the following broadcast here on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Cinema Stories, where we talk about movie and TV news and reviews, and maybe, just maybe, we'll learn a little something about ourselves. If not, then maybe I made you laugh a couple of times. I don't know. New episodes air bi-weekly on Tuesdays. Thanks again for checking out the totally spectacular following broadcast here on Public House Media.
The latest headlines.
The Houston Astros, the defending World Series champions, got better adding Garrett Cole.
The insightful interviews.
Rick Saratella, NFL Draft Bible. With how much emphasis is put on the position, yet how many over the last couple of years we've had questions. Why do we put such an emphasis on drafting a quarterback number one overall?
The bottom line is there's not enough good quarterbacks to go around. And I think with the new CBA, it's really a low-risk gamble now. If you look at the playoff teams, the common denominator, good quarterback play.
The hottest takes.
I think the guy to blame is the one guy who hasn't left yet. I think Russell Westbrook is one of the bigger problems in Oklahoma City.
Can all be found on Press Row. Broadcasting is part of the Public House Media Network. Here's your host.
It doesn't matter what your name is.
Christian Heimel.
Welcome into the program. First segment on this Thursday, May 17, 2018, our 50th show, the Big 5-0 for Press Row here on the Public House Media Network. I'm Christian Heimel. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review like you have for so long already for 50 fantastic shows. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, Stitcher.com, and of course, thephmedia.com, where you can also go and get yourself some awesome Press Row gear, get some t-shirts, sweatshirts, socks, coffee mugs, whatever it is that you're looking for, we've got it there on thephmedia.com. A lot to get to today. Biggest headline this week in sports, of course, Monday's decision from the Supreme Court to strike down PASPA, the Performance and Amateur Sports Gambling Act, basically, that says outside of Nevada and a couple of other states, really Delaware and Oregon in only certain circumstances, you were allowed to gamble now. Obviously, there's still a lot to get through. Your state still has to pass certain legislation, but for the most part, the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act has been struck down, deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court in a fight that New Jersey has been going after for years, and it's finally over now, and sports betting is now legal across the country, not just in Nevada. A.J. Perez, who is a staff writer for USA Today, he will join us in about 12, 15 minutes here to talk about what this actually means, how much longer we still have to go. He has a tremendous article that he wrote on Monday, which actually breaks everything down for you in terms of what this means, how quickly you're able to discuss and actually start betting, and what we might see from certain leagues, whether it be Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NFL, even college sports. All of it, we'll break it down with A.J. Perez of USA Today Sports in just a little bit. Of course, you've got Game 3, Celtics-Cavaliers tonight. Can the Cavs come back from down 2-0 to the Boston Celtics? Is this a surprising 2-0 for everybody? I don't think so, personally. I mean, when you look at the Celtics, they play a great brand of team defense, and that's what Indiana struggled, or it's what Cleveland struggled with against Indiana. It's a young team. It's a hungry team that doesn't have the mental stigma that Toronto did. And they actually have guys who play pretty sound quality defense across the board. So Game 3 tonight, we'll see exactly what happens. There should be fun. Not tonight. Beg your pardon. That's actually on Saturday. I don't know why. They have, this is unbelievable. They have like 4 days off to get to Cleveland. This is the dumbest thing in the world. I'll touch on that in a little bit. The scheduling of the NBA playoffs just infuriates me to the point where it's almost unwatchable and unnecessary at this point as well. Robinson Cano, of course. We all saw the 80-game suspension for a PEDs, although it's a diuretic. It's just the positive test was for a diuretic. The suspension is treated like a PED. So we'll touch on that as well in a little bit. But I want to start with the NBA Draft Lottery on Tuesday night. For those of you who were unaware, the Phoenix Suns, who had the best chance of getting the number 1 overall pick, actually have the number 1 overall pick now. First time in franchise history that Phoenix has won the draft lottery. And the question now becomes, is it Arizona State DeAndre Ayton, or is it the European Luka Doncic going to go number 1 overall to the Suns? Sacramento Kings pick 2nd. Atlanta Hawks pick 3rd. The rest of the draft lottery, as it figured out, the Orlando Magic, Memphis Grizzlies, Orlando Magic, Chicago Bulls, Cleveland Cavaliers, Knicks, Sixers, Hornets, Clippers get 12 and 13, and then the Denver Nuggets. So in the Kyrie Irving deal that Cleveland got, they end up now with the number 8 pick, even though they were hoping probably to have something a little bit higher to maybe help LeBron James and keep LeBron James around here this offseason, if possible. Maybe trying to trade that number 8 pick to get a veteran, get a talented player back in too. But this is where it kind of gets interesting. It's weird. We always, nobody really talks about the Major League Baseball draft. It happens in June in the middle of the season, which to some people can be the reason why it's not talked about. It can be a bad thing for it, but for the most part, college sports, college baseball at least, doesn't get the same notoriety as college basketball or college football, of course, because they're not money sports. But in the same way that the NFL Combine is the start of the unofficial start of the offseason for the NFL, the NBA Draft Lottery is that for the NBA. We get really excited. We start planning who could be taken where, what possible trades there might be, and how certain teams could look all before the season's actually over. There's still 4 teams playing for a championship, and we're talking already about next year. It's what makes the NBA so unique, I think, in that sense, is the fact that as much as every other sport outside of baseball has their draft in the offseason, but there's nothing to really talk about for next year already. I mean, sure, because you've got college football and college basketball going on at the same time as the professional level, you can sit there and go, wow, imagine Baker Mayfield on this team, Sam Darnold on that team, Marvin Bagley, DeAndre Ayton in the pros with this team right now. You can always imagine that, but until you actually know how the order is going to play out, you don't get a chance to do that. And now we have that opportunity in the NBA. So DeAndre Ayton, of course, going to be one of the first players taken. If he's not first, he'll probably go second to Sacramento. Luka Doncic is really interesting. Real Madrid, 19 years old, has great experience playing over in Europe, and their new Suns coach, Igor Kokoskov, coached Doncic in Slovenia last year for the European Championship. So if you're really looking at the writing on the wall, Luka Doncic is probably going to be the number 1 overall pick. However, it wouldn't be surprising at all to see DeAndre Ayton. And a lot of this is going to be interesting to see who they pair with Josh Jackson, who was the 4th pick in the draft last year for Phoenix. And then, of course, we can always start speculating on where, do certain teams pick? Where do the Orlando Magic, where do the Dallas Mavericks pick? Where do who do the Cavaliers take? Can the Knicks, in their first year without Phil Jackson running the show in the last couple of years, can they do something? Can the 76ers get a draft pick that maybe really helps them out as well? Do the Cavaliers make a trade with anybody to try to keep LeBron James? Or who do they pick? Who do they think has the best chance at keeping LeBron James? So it's really interesting that when we're still in the midst of the playoffs in the NBA, we are actually going to start seriously talking about what could happen next year. So kind of fun, kind of interesting. I'm intrigued by it, most certainly. I thought what was really insane, the most insane part about the NBA draft lottery is the fact that all of these trades, there are stipulations with these draft picks that are traded. Like, for instance, the Celtics, a team that is 2 wins away from the NBA Finals without their 2 best players, somehow could have had a top 5 draft pick because of that trade they made with Markelle Fultz and the Sixers for the draft pick. They sent another pick to Philadelphia, which was one of the Brooklyn picks they got from when they fleeced the Nets for Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce. The Sixers then traded that pick to Los Angeles, and with that they put a condition on that pick. If it was the number 1 overall pick or pick 6 through 10, that pick stayed with the Sixers. However, if it was 2, 3, 4, or 5, that pick went to the Celtics. So it's just so strange, the little minutia, the little fine print in all of these trades that can really impact an entire team, an entire franchise's history. And you look at the draft lottery, you look at who some of these guys have taken. The Orlando Magic, the last time they had the number 1 overall pick, for instance, they traded, after they got that draft pick, they took Chris Webber, technically number 1, and then traded him to Golden State for the number 3 pick, which was Penny Hardaway. You look at the Celtics last year, they traded that number 1 pick down 2 spots to get Jason Tatum, the guy they wanted, and by all accounts, it looks as though that was the best possible move and that Danny Ainge won that trade. So the NBA trade lottery is not only just the start of the quote-unquote off-season, even though we're still in the playoffs for the NBA, but it really can be a turning point for so many franchises as we move forward in the course of their near-term history. I mean, think about the Cleveland Cavaliers. If they didn't get that number 1 overall pick, where could LeBron James have gone? Could you imagine when LeBron James was drafted in 2003 to the number 1 overall pick? Could you imagine and that pick, that number 1 overall pick, going to going here to, as I'm trying to find who that number 2 pick obviously was, going to Detroit? Could you imagine Darko Milicic? Could you imagine the course of how things would change if, say, Denver got that number 1 overall pick instead of Carmelo Anthony? If Toronto got that number 1 overall pick instead of Chris Bosh? If the Clippers, you imagine if the Chicago Bulls got that pick? Could you imagine? They were the 7th overall pick, and then they took Kirk Heinrich out of Kansas that year. Could you imagine if they somehow got the number 1 overall pick and Chicago had LeBron James instead? It would change the full landscape of what we know as basketball. But it's just one of the exciting parts. It's probably, to me, outside of a legitimately talented and impressive series, the most exciting part of the NBA. Because I can't get excited for the regular season. I love watching the playoffs when they're competitive. I thought Game 2 for the Celtics and Cavaliers was a lot more fun than Game 1. Game 1 of that Rockets-Warriors series was interesting to watch. It was kind of frustrating, though, to see the Rockets almost kind of quit sometimes defensively. We'll touch on that in a little bit more in a little bit. But this is where it gets kind of exciting, is the draft lottery. I don't really care too much for the draft, so to speak, after the first 5 picks, much like the NFL draft. I just don't care. After the first 5 picks or after my team picks, I don't care anymore. But it's kind of exciting to see where things could potentially go. So now all the trade rumors start, all the big boards get to come out, the mock drafts get to start going here in the world of the NBA. So Could be interesting, could be a lot of fun. We'll see exactly what happens over the next couple of weeks as we get set for the draft coming up pretty soon, actually. Going to be in Brooklyn, obviously, with the draft come June 21st. So, of course, we'll have a full draft preview as we get a little bit closer to that. When we come back, A.J. Perez, USA Today Sports, is going to join us. He has a great article up on USAtoday.com about what the Supreme Court's ruling on PASPA means, what exactly we can expect, how soon is betting going to be legalized across the country, how soon can you start actually placing bets in your home state, and what it means for some of these professional sports leagues, whether it be the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, college sports. What does it mean in general for all of it? A.J. Perez, USA Today Sports, is going to join us here in just a moment. Your listener questions will also break down the NBA Conference Finals and some of the bigger headlines in sports as well. It's all coming up. You're on Press Row as part of the Public House Media Network.
This is Sam Kirby, host of Cinema Stories here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Cinema Stories, where we hang out and just talk movie and TV news and reviews, and it's awesome. A new show comes out every single Tuesday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Cinema Stories. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Want to be part of the show? Go to Facebook and search Press Row Podcast Public House Media, or find us on Twitter and Instagram at Press Row PHM. You can also email the program, pressrowphm@gmail.com. This is Press Row with Christian Heimel, a Public House Media podcast.
Welcome back on Press Row, everybody. Christian Heimel here with you, broadcasting as part of the Public House Media Network. The big news in the sports world this week, it came on Monday morning, Supreme Court striking down PASPA, the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, essentially allowing states now to control the own idea of sports betting, sports gambling. To help us break it down, maybe understand it a little bit more, A.J. Perez, staff writer, USA Today Sports, an article earlier this week about this, what it means for all of us. So, AJ, I guess I'll, first off, thanks so much for the time, and I guess I'll start right there. What does this actually mean now for the world of sports?
Yeah, PASPA was passed, 25, well, it's been on the books 25 years. Federal law, basically, that limited sports gambling really to Nevada. There were a couple other states that were involved that could do some kind of wagering, Delaware being one that had that over the last decade they've had parlays, but it basically limited state-sanctioned betting to one state. Now, after the decision, now all states can offer sports betting. It was overturned because New Jersey fought several times, and they've gone to federal court a couple times. It finally got up to the Supreme Court. It was looking like it was going that way. We didn't know until yesterday, but with the arguments in December, it looked like the justices were leaning toward, declaring PASPA was basically a violation of states' rights. And that's what they ruled yesterday.
How much of this it can be accredited to the changing of the times and just becoming more accepting of sports gambling, or the fact that I believe, as you had noted, or a couple of people have noted, $150 billion a year, 97% of it illegally? I mean, how much of this was just the idea of the changing of the times and being more accepting of it, and how much of it was that's a lot of money for the government not to have a piece of?
Especially in this case, you had New Jersey, who wants to keep their casinos and racetracks, and they're struggling over the last almost since they started gambling back in the 80s. They've been struggling. You're on top of that, so they saw this as a means to get some tax revenue out of it, and they've actually made some, especially in mobile gaming. They do mobile casinos, and they make a couple $100 million in revenue off that alone. So that's part of it. The states want in on it. Some of the states, I'm writing the story right now, some of the states are pricing themselves out of it with taxes that are just obscenely too high. and charging millions of dollars just for a license fee. But there's going to be, and all of it, you have to give credit to FanDuel and DraftKings as well. That have kind of changed, even though they always said, and they argued in court, in various courts, that it was gambling. People kind of accepted it as gambling, even though it was daily fantasy. And and you saw clubs and saw teams and leagues kind of partner with some of these with FanDuel and DraftKings. So that kind of changed the perception of it.
I mean, it's kind of interesting, though, to see this, because I can still to this day remember games where the announcer on a late 3 where it doesn't affect the actual outcome makes a comment about how many people in Vegas cared about that 3 or stuff like that. Did this just become too much of the cultural norm for this not to actually happen?
Yeah, to say, I mean, for years, the leagues, and especially the NCAA, but the NFL especially as well, that they were against this. They were totally against it, and a lot of them still are. NCAA is really against it still. But just to say gambling, and like you mentioned, it's 98% of it is done through bookies or offshore illegally. Hasn't driven the audience to the NFL would be myopic. I mean, that's a big part of it, especially during the Super Bowl. I mean, who doesn't have this? Who doesn't, besides me, kind of put in for a square or something? And that's huge. And the March Madness, to say that that you fill in a bracket out, there's millions of brackets get filled out every year. That doesn't drive the audience, and people people care more. And there's always downsides. The gambling addiction, like any other addiction, is real and needs to be addressed. But it can't be addressed really when you're dealing with bookies or offshore books, especially, who really don't, who have no, can't offer the help and can't monitor this kind of thing.
Speaking with A.J. Perez, staff writer, USA Today Sports, about the Supreme Court's decision earlier this week to basically strike down PASPA, and allow state betting now on sports and other games that are going on. So how quickly, I guess, can we see this? I mean, New Jersey, obviously the ones who are really fighting. It's there in Nevada. Yep. You mentioned Delaware, but how soon can someone want to go and place a wager on the next basketball game, baseball game, football game?
Yeah, one racetrack today announced they're targeting May 28th, so that's only less than 2 weeks away. Or they may push forward. They may need to tweak the law a little bit, but the operator there said they're going to start taking bets on May 28th, and you're going to see others. West Virginia is going to follow closely behind Mississippi. Delaware could shift some things. I don't think we're going to see more than 4 or 5 states before football season offer it. But I think we're gonna, by the end of summer, we're gonna have a handful already, and it's gonna keep it'll keep trickling out. I think a lot of the states that are bordering each other, Pennsylvania is going to be one. It'll kind of cluster where one state offers it, the other state feels compelled to offer it. It'll just start rolling out that way. There's about 20 states so far that have some kind of legislation either up for debate or 4 or 5 cases been passed and signed into law. But there's still, they still have to have set the rules for each state. They have to have the guidelines for the casinos, and they have to, figure out the tax structure.
Still a lot left to be decided, but I thought it was kind of interesting, as you pointed out in your article on Monday. The NBA and Major League Baseball have already kind of started preparing for this. What do some of these pro sports leagues do now moving forward and seeing the potential for their game to really become a betting house?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. They've proposed a quote unquote integrity fee, which would be a 1% tax basically on anything bet. That's a lot, because these margins aren't, for sports books in Nevada aren't huge. They make money, but they don't make, the 1% integrity fee. One gambling company told me that's 20% of their revenue, really. 1% would be 1%. If they say they make 5 or 6% revenue, that's a large cut. And that's when a lot of the states so far that are going to be pushing forward aren't paying that integrity fee. I don't know if that's dead in the water, but it could be. But they're going to reap the ancillary benefit of, more people are going to pay attention and more people are going to be involved if they have a little money on the action there.
Is there any discussion, have you heard anything about how to keep, quote-unquote, the game clean? I mean, we don't want 1919 or Pete Rose or Tim Donaghy. I mean, there's a lot of instances throughout sports where betting can affect the actual outcome of a game. Has there been any discussion of how to ensure that that doesn't become rampant now?
The companies and that who do the gaming and the ones that provide the technology, they're big on self-policing. They say they monitor, they have AI and other technology that can kind of identify weird betting patterns. And they've done that in Europe, and a lot of same companies are doing it here in the United States to do the back end stuff. So there's that. They do, they do bring in the leagues and the authorities in on if they see something irregular. But there probably needs to be a federal law, and I think Orrin Hatch, senator from Utah, proposed that there needs to be something to replace PASPA. Not saying outlaw, and he's pretty anti. He was one of the PASPA basically co-authors back in the 90s, 92. But I don't know if you can roll back sports gaming at this point. But having some kind of oversight, putting a federal agency in charge, would not be a bad idea.
I thought it was interesting on Tuesday, the NFL comes out saying they want Congress to kind of examine these things and pass some legislation on betting, almost seeming as though the owners are against the idea of being allowed to bet on football, yet there are a bunch of them who, as you discussed a little bit earlier, are investors in things like FanDuel and DraftKings.
Yeah, that's it's kind of like one of those things. It's kind of, I'm not saying it's a charade, but publicly they have been against it. NBA being one of the exceptions. They've kind of come around. Both former Commissioner Stern and also the current Commissioner Silver have kind of changed the way they their approach to gambling. But I think overall they just don't. I think they, especially with the team coming to Vegas in the NFL, I think that they're still a little sensitive to it. But they're at the same time, their fans are doing this already. Their fans are going to bookies. Their fans are going to offshore books. They're already betting. To bring this more out in the open, or you don't have to do it illegally. I don't know if that's much of an argument at this point.
So where do we go from here now? I mean, obviously, you mentioned earlier, we talked about it a little bit. There's still legislation from within the states that has to be passed. There's expectation that federal regulation will be involved in this. But from a broad spectrum, now that sports betting is legal in a sense throughout the country, where do you see this going, and where do you see it having the biggest impact on our world as sports fans?
Well, you have to look at New Jersey first. They're gonna offer an app. The casinos there where you have to, I think you just register. West Virginia, I think you have to be in the casino to register the app to start, and then you can bet anywhere in West Virginia. I think in New Jersey, they're going to have it where you can just be within the borders of New Jersey, and you're able to place bets like you can now. You're not going to get in the U.S., I don't think we'll ever have the wild offshore books like, how long will the national anthem singer at Super Bowl sing. We're probably never going to get to that point, but you're going to be able to bet, parlays, point spread bets on football and money line bets on baseball, like there are in Vegas. I think it'll probably within 5-6 years, you may have 15, 20 states that'll offer it. It's not going to happen overnight. Depending on what the feds do, I don't know. They could try to roll it back. I think the horse is out of the barn at this point, though.
A.J. Perez, staff writer, USA Today Sports, details it very nicely. Article released earlier on Monday, what it means Supreme Court strikes down PASPA law that limited sports betting. A.J., we thank you so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right, A.J. Perez, USA Today Sports. And, yeah, I mean, listen, if you go down to his article, and that's kind of where you get the idea of everything, what it means, how soon everything's going to happen, what there is still left to do. But like I said in the first segment, I mean, this was something that, honestly, I'm surprised it took this long. When you consider how many members of the media have been discussing it, how many times do you watch College Game Day and they're talking about picking against the spread? How many times do you watch any sports preview show, any sports talk show, listen to it, watch it, whatever, read it in the paper? How many times do you see it mentioned where a team is such and such against the spread? or a coach is such and such against the spread. Scott Van Pelt on SportsCenter has a full segment to bad beats and losing those type of bets. And if you can only do it in one state, why is it so nationally discussed? So it's not surprising that it's happened. To me, it's a little surprising that it took this long to actually happen. And again, the number that jumped out to me was incredible that AJ mentioned. The American Gaming Association estimates at least $150 billion a year, 97% of that bet illegally. So now that it's out there in the open, it's something that everybody can do wherever they want. There's more money for the government to be had. There's more money for potentially leagues to be had based off how they do the regulation. And it's just now there. My biggest concern, though, as I think with everybody's concern, is the integrity of the game. And it's really going to come to show this fall when how much money is bet on Alabama or Ohio State or Notre Dame football. And if those players, you could have a whole issue like you had with Boston College in the 70s, and the point-shaving scandal like you had in New York basketball in the 40s and 50s. You're going to have a lot of this now because it is legal. You're going to have so many people able to do it and able to get in these kids' ears, and I think it's only a matter of time. This, honestly, may push the envelope on paying college athletes. It may do that because it has that ability to really kind of infiltrate college athletics in a way that boosters and endorsement deals never could. So that's my biggest fear, is that now that betting on sports is legal, when these things start to become regulated, is how much does a kid like Marvin Bagley, DeAndre Ayton, Jalen Hurts, Baker Mayfield, how much could they possibly get from quote-unquote throwing a game in college and make it that much worse? Plenty more to get to here on Press Row. We'll touch on the NBA, NHL playoffs, as well as your listener questions in just a little bit. It's all coming up. You're on Press Row on the Public House Media Network.
This is Katie, co-host of Coffee with Keith and Katie here on Public House Media. Once you are done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Coffee with Keith and Katie, where we talk about the adventures of our daily lives and relationship. A new show comes out every Tuesday and Friday at 8:30 p.m. Central. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Coffee with Keith and Katie. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Listen to every episode and get the latest shows sent right to you. Subscribe to Press Row on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, and Stitcher.com. Or visit us online at www.thephmedia.com. This is Press Row with Christian Heimel, a Public House Media podcast.
Welcome back on Press Row. Christian Heimel here with you. Broadcasting as part of the Public House Media Network. Your listener questions coming up just a little bit. You can always get in touch with the show on social media, Twitter and Instagram handle at PressRowPHM. Email us, PressRowPHM@gmail.com. Or you can find us on Facebook, Press Row Podcast by Public House Media. You can find me on Twitter as well, at Chris Heimel, ChrisHeimall. Want to get into the playoffs in the NBA. Of course, the Stanley Cup Finals as well. Tonight you've got Game 4, Tampa Bay trying to even up the series against the Capitals. Western Conference Finals is pretty exciting as well. Tampa Bay, huge win in Game 3 on Tuesday to get back into the series, really, because after the Capitals kind of dominated them the first two games, they're able to rebound nicely. Same with Vegas. They rebounded nicely in Game 2. They've got Game 4 coming up tomorrow in Sin City as well. So Tampa Bay, Washington tonight at 8 o'clock, and then this weekend you've got the NBA Finals, or NBA Conference Finals, excuse me. And let me just say this real quick. The NBA has an issue, I think, that's not being discussed. You got players who are talking about wanting to rest. You've got fans upset that star players are resting on the road, and everybody wants to be healthy for the finals and healthy for the playoff run and all that crap. I understand it, but here's what I don't get. Why are you having more off days in the postseason than you are in the regular season? like combined. Like there are three off. The Celtics and Cavaliers played Game 2 on Tuesday night in Boston. They're playing Game 3 in Cleveland on Saturday. Why is there that much time between Games 2 and 3? Same with the Warriors and Rockets. They played Game 2 last night, and they're not playing again until Sunday. Why are there 3 off days between these games just to travel? You don't have that in baseball. You don't have that in hockey. You only have it in football because it's necessary because of how physically demanding that sport is. I understand. These guys are athletes. They need time to rest. You want your best players at their best when it really matters. I understand that. But you know what? You don't need 3 days off in a row for these things. If the NBA, it takes you, let me see here. I'm just checking this out real quick. It takes you 10 hours to drive from Boston to Cleveland. 10 hours. You know what that is on a flight? 2 hours, maybe, from Boston to Cleveland. And you guys get chartered flights in the NBA. They're already in Cleveland. They're already there. What do you need 3 off days for? It's embarrassing. It makes it almost unwatchable to me because I'm sitting here waiting for it. And not only do you have 3 off days in between, to travel from Boston to Cleveland, but you have an off day between each game. That's unnecessary. You don't need that. You don't. You don't. And the same thing goes in the Western Conference. It is, let me see here. It's a 4-hour flight from Houston to Oakland for Golden State. 4 hours. You don't need 3 days for that. If you can do it in the regular season, you can do it in the postseason. It's too long. I understand you want to play on the weekend so you have prime time. But you know what? You're the NBA. You're the NBA. You're the second most popular sport in the country behind the NFL from a rating standpoint. And it's not even close. You know why hockey playoffs are so much better? Or perceived to be so much better? One of the reasons is the home atmospheres. The fact that each fan base has their own personality and their own little niches here, which is awesome. But the fact that they just have those off days, and I know the NHL has off days in between games too, but this is hockey we're talking about. These are guys where they're on the ice for 40 seconds at most because of how much they exert themselves at a time. It's embarrassing to the NBA that you've got this much time off in between games. I understand you want your players at their healthiest. I get it, so that you have the best possible thing. But come on. It's boring. I'm sitting here on a Thursday night or a Friday night, and there's no playoff basketball going on. So you know what I'm going to do instead? I'm going to switch over to hockey because there's hockey going on. I'll watch Winnipeg, Vegas. I'm fine with that. I'll watch baseball instead. Like it's embarrassing that the NBA needs these players complain about not getting enough rest during the regular season, not being able to perform at their best in the playoffs, and then they sit here and they're bored out of their minds for 3 days. Like, what's LeBron James going to do? I mean, I know he took an absolute shot from Jason Tatum, but he still finished with a triple-double, 45, 10, and 12 on Tuesday night. You think he needs to rest? You think J.R. Smith needs time off to get his head straight after a flagrant foul on Al Horford? You think the Celtics want to have 3 days off after how well they're playing? You ask any athlete. If you ask 10 of them, 9 of them are going to say that they would rather play back-to-back because they're in a rhythm, and the other one's going to be lying to you. It's embarrassing how much time the NBA gives its players off in the postseason. It's too long. I'm sorry. We should be in the NBA Finals, or the season should be over with already. This is embarrassing, and I can't do it. It just bothers me with how much time they need off. You don't need this much travel time. You don't. They do it in baseball. They do it in hockey. You get 1 travel day because you're on a chartered flight. If you're doing connections and you're sitting in coach, okay, I get it. But they're not doing that in Cleveland, in Boston, in Golden State, in Houston. They're not doing it. They're not. You want to give them off days to go hang out in the Cleveland nightlife? Please. Oakland nightlife? Come on. Seriously? Get their minds right, more practice. You don't need more practice this late in the season. You want to play games. It's embarrassing. What's also embarrassing is Ty Lue saying that the Celtics are gooning up the game after that Game 2 loss. I don't understand that. That's ridiculous. That's such a stupid comment from Tyronn Lue, who's been outcoached in this series and doesn't know exactly how to win this series with the best player on earth. Doesn't know how to get his team ready, how to play solid defense against Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart. Doesn't know how to get a proper offensive play in so that Marcus Morris isn't shutting down LeBron James, so that Terry Rozier doesn't go off for 14 points. Can't put together a solid lineup to actually compete against this team that is without its two best players. He's getting out-coached, and he's calling the Celtics gooning up the game because, what, because Marcus Morris yelled in Tristan Thompson's face? Tristan Thompson is a 2x4. And why? Because he got upset that Marcus Smart took offense when J.R. Smith had a dirty and potentially malicious play shoving Al Horford, who's up in the air, towards the backboard. Horford could have hit his head. Gooning up the game. Get over yourself, Tyronn Lue. Learn how to coach. It's unbelievable. And the Cavaliers right now, I mean, listen, this is not about LeBron James. Get that through your heads right now. This is not an indictment on LeBron James. This is an indictment on the front office, on the coaches. I understand that the NBA is a players' league and that LeBron James is coach, GM, judge, jury, executioner there in Cleveland. I get that. But this dude is going out of his mind. His fourth 40-point game of the postseason. 4 of them. A triple-double with a strained neck. And meanwhile, J.R. Smith's going 0 for 7 and is saying that he loves when he's getting booed and being chanted at on the road. You're getting booed because you're a dirty player, not because you're hitting shots, man. Come on. Like, it was embarrassing. It's embarrassing to watch these Cavaliers right now. This is exactly what they did in the first series against Indiana. Kevin Love, 15 rebounds, 22 points, played pretty well. Still a -10. Jeff Green, a -17. Tristan Thompson, 8 points, 7 rebounds. Nothing. Not even a block. Your center doesn't even have a block. Your 2 blocks came from Jeff Green. 2 of your 5. George Hill, LeBron has 1 as well. Kyle Korver, 11 points. That's it. 1 rebound for Kyle Korver. Larry Nance Jr., who was supposed to help because of how high-flying this kid can be, 11 minutes he plays, 0 points, 3 rebounds, 2 steals. George Hill, your point guard, again, almost ineffective with 1 assist. This Celtics team, this should not surprise anybody. This Celtics team is playing at an incredibly high level because they're playing great team basketball. They have multiple guys stepping up on different nights. Al Horford, 10 rebounds, 15 points. Terry Rozier, 18 points, 14 of them, by the way, coming in that third quarter in which the Celtics outscored Cleveland by 14, 36-22. I know LeBron had just gotten hurt towards the end of the second quarter, but LeBron still went off after having 21 of 27 points. LeBron James, the end of the first quarter was Boston 23, LeBron James 21, the rest of the Cavaliers 6. When you have LeBron go off for 21 points in the first quarter and you can't win a game on the road? Come on, man. Marcus Smart, 9 assists. Your backup point guard has 9 assists, the Celtics. They're just playing better basketball. Brad Stevens is coaching his head off. And the Celtics look like a team that's going to the NBA Finals. And the Cavaliers look like a team that, again, as we've said multiple times on this show and on other shows throughout this season, it's LeBron James and a bunch of dudes from the YMCA. Like, they're not playing well. They did against Toronto because they had a mental edge. Mentally, they knew they were going to beat Toronto. I don't think mentally they thought they were going to beat Indiana. I think the first time Indiana punched them in the face, they kind of sat down and said, uh-oh. Kevin Love hasn't been that great. and this is, I hate doing this to Kevin Love, but he might have been one of the more overrated players that we've ever seen. Great stats. But in an NBA where offensive rebounding doesn't exist, Kevin Love got a lot of love, got a lot of props in Minnesota for his rebounding. When nobody rebounds. Nobody does it. LeBron James gets 10 rebounds because he stands there, doesn't play defense, and waits for a missed shot. Kevin Love doesn't play defense, waits for a missed shot. And he just hasn't been as dominant as they hoped for when they signed him and when they got him from Minnesota. And I tell you what, as much as Boston fans wanted him there and were freaking out when Rajon Rondo and Kevin Love were hanging out at Fenway Park, guarantee you they're really happy he's not there now. Cavaliers are in a lot of trouble. LeBron James is in a lot of trouble, wrongfully, because this isn't about him. When you put up 42, 12, and 10, it's not about you're playing badly in 39 minutes with a strained neck. It's about how your team can't step up. Your coach can't figure it out. It's not about LeBron here, folks. It's about the Boston Celtics playing incredibly well and the rest of the Cavaliers not knowing what they're doing. Kyrie Irving was a huge, huge help to them a year ago. Really, really was. And I don't know whose ego. I know it was Kyrie that wanted out because he didn't want to be treated like a son, quote unquote, to LeBron James. But LeBron should have done a hell of a lot more to try to keep him because this is not what he was envisioning. You got a guy who's been to 7 straight NBA Finals, and he has a chance to get swept in the conference finals here. Oh, man. It's insane, the mentality of it all. So I'm going to break down Houston and Golden State here in a little bit because the mental aspect of it is what's really going to ruin Houston in this conference finals. So it's listen, if you don't know it now, understand it's Celtics Warriors. Warriors are probably going to win in 5, maybe 6. But understand that it's going to be Celtics and Warriors in the NBA Finals. And the Warriors are going to win. As much as I believe in the Celtics, especially, they've proven me wrong every single time out. But there's a mental part of this that is really important. That's coming up along with your listener questions. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, share us with your friends, family, all that good stuff. Coworkers, the guy next door, Spreaker.com, Stitcher.com, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and iTunes as well. ThePHmedia.com. Get yourself some awesome Press Row gear. We're all coming back just a little bit. Your listener questions on the other side of the break. This is Press Row.
This is Nicole Kelly, host of Loud and Proud here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Loud and Proud, where we talk about issues facing the disability community. A new show comes out weekly. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Loud and Proud. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Want to be part of the show? Go to Facebook and search Press Row Podcast Public House Media. Or find us on Twitter and Instagram at Press Row PHM. You can also email the program, pressrowphm@gmail.com. This is Press Row with Christian Heimel, a Public House Media podcast.
Talked a lot about money today. Sports betting now deemed legal across the country. It's up to the states to decide how it'll be regulated and how it'll be policed, all that fun stuff. A.J. Perez, USA Today Sports, joined us earlier. We thank him for that, breaking it all down. Check out his article on USAToday.com. It really kind of breaks down everything. Again, the number that's it's staggering, $150 billion a year, 97% of that bet illegally when it comes to sports betting. And it's insane to me that, number one, it took the government this long, to figure it out. But number two, the fact that, it was illegal to begin with. I mean, it's been a part of our culture. Like I had said to AJ, I still remember Brent Musburger, along with many others, sports commentators who make comments about the over-under, make comments about the point spread during the game. So it's one of those subversive things that the culture is just there, So it's not surprising that it's here, and be that as it may, it'll be interesting to see exactly how it all happens. I personally think it's a good thing. My biggest fear is, again, like I said earlier, is when that first bookie or casino or gambling area goes up to a freshman or a sophomore kid and says, hey, listen, throw this game and we'll give you a cut of the money we make from all the bets. So that's my biggest concern. And the NCAA, which already has enough issues with players getting paid, is going to have to get their act together real quick. So get to your fan questions here, your listener questions. As always, we appreciate it. You can check us out on social media, Twitter and Instagram at PressRowPHM. Email the show, pressrowphm@gmail.com, or you can find us on Facebook, Press Row Podcast by Public House Media. Find me on Twitter as well, at Chris Heimel, ChrisHeimall. Matt in Texas. Des Bryant says he has no regrets after turning down from his offer from the Ravens. Where do you think he will eventually sign? To be honest, I don't know if he will. 30 years old. He'll turn 30 in November. He's had 3 straight years with less than 90 catches and less than 70 catches and less than 900 receiving yards. Turned down a deal with Baltimore, who went on and signed Willie Snead. He's hoping for a 1-year deal, but I don't know. There's something about him. Foot injuries, knee injuries, 69 catches last year, 838 yards, 6 touchdowns, soon to be 30 years old. I've said this before. He feels like the New England Patriots. It feels that way, that he'll be signed by the Patriots late. He'll come into training camp, and he'll somehow put together a decent season by having Brady there. But I don't know if his injuries are going to allow him to put up the numbers that they need. And, when you have his kind of size, you hope to have the speed that allows you to be a deep threat. He just feels like that, like Randy Moss at the end of his career. Now, granted, he's not as fast or as talented as Randy, but I'll be honest, I don't know if Des Bryant signs. And if he does, it still feels like the New England Patriots to me. It really, really does. It just feels that way. But we'll see what happens. I think the telling part about him is the fact that, it's been 3 years since he had 900 yards receiving in a single season. So that's going to be a big red flag to a lot of teams looking for him. Eric in Boston, Carson Smith injured his shoulders out indefinitely after throwing his glove. What's the weirdest injury that you've seen or heard of? This was weird. He got really upset after giving up a home run to Chris Davis on Monday, threw his glove in frustration in the dugout, and has a shoulder subluxation, which it doesn't sound good. He's already gone through Tommy John once. Dave Dombrowski, the Red Sox president of baseball operations, said it's got the potential of being a major injury, so he's on the 10-day disabled list, no timetable of when he's going to return. But that's just dumb, like just throwing your glove around like that and getting upset. Like, I can remember, and so to answer your question, there have been some really dumb ones, some really bad injuries. Like, there's a great article on complex.com, the 50 bizarrest sports injuries, and a couple of them that I didn't even know about. Like, I didn't know Michael Jordan sliced his finger open on a cigar cutter. Like, that's interesting. That's number 50 on their list. I'm trying to remember who it was. I mean, obviously you've got, Plexico Burress shooting himself in the leg. Jason Pierre-Paul having a firework go off in his hand is not good. Aaron Boone tearing his Achilles playing basketball in the offseason. That's not really bizarre so much as it is just dumb. Ben Roethlisberger, same way when he had that motorcycle crash, not wearing a helmet. But you've got weird ones like Joel Zamaya for the Detroit Tigers in 2006. Had right wrist inflammation from playing too much Guitar Hero. You've got guys who, Carlos Zambrano, elbow soreness from excessive computer use. You've got guys like, Jose Canseco, who tore his UCL by pitching. Dude, don't be pitching. Manny Cordova for the Orioles in 2002, almost 16 years to the day, May 20th, 2002, fell asleep in the tanning booth and had facial burns. Like, that's just ridiculous. obviously, Amari Stoudemire punching a fire extinguisher and getting his hand all cut up from the glass is pretty bad. I'm trying to remember. I think it was Kevin Brown who did that for the Yankees. Kevin Brown broke his hand, I think, when he punched the dugout wall after being pulled from Kevin Brown broke his hand in 2004 after he punched the wall in the dugout against the Orioles. So that was a pretty bad one. But I tell you, the two ones that are the dumbest in my mind, the two dumbest ones I've ever seen, Gus Frerotte had easily one of the dumbest ones. This is 97. Gives himself a concussion running headfirst into the wall to celebrate a touchdown. Like, that's just dumb. And then the one that's really the biggest dumb one to me will always be, I don't care, it's the dumbest thing ever. Bill Gramatica, 2001, hits a game-winning 43-yard field goal. Sorry. This was a 43-yard field goal in the first quarter. Jumps up with a big old fist pump, and when he lands, tears his ACL out for the year. Oh, my God. That was just so bad and so dumb. And still one of the things that I just laugh at every single time. So Carson Smith is bad, but to me, Gus Frerotte and Bill Gramatica are up there, the top two dumbest sports injuries of all time, in my opinion. So John in New York, with Robinson Cano being suspended for 80 games, what does this do for his Hall of Fame case? Listen, this is a really loaded question because Robinson Cano, by all accounts, when you look at just his stats, 2,400 hits, 305 homers, a 304 career lifetime batting average. Those are Hall of Fame numbers. Hall of Fame worthy. Cano is one of 16 players with a 300 average, 2,000 hits, 1,000 runs, 500 doubles, 300 homers, and 1,000 RBIs. Others in there, Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Stan Musial. He's an 8-time All-Star. Second most prolific. He's got the second most home runs by a second baseman ever, only behind Jeff Kent. Stan Musial, Lou Gehrig, Albert Pujols, Miggy Cabrera, and Robinson Cano, the only players to hit 300 homers, 500 doubles by age 34. He is and should be, in every sense of the word, a Hall of Famer outside of this now positive drug test. And listen, it's treated as a PED test because what ended up happening, he tested positive for a diuretic, which can be seen as a masking agent. And when the independent performance people take a look, and the drug assessment people take a look at this, they can do their own investigation, and if they believe Robinson Cano to have wrongly taken it or taken it not as a masking agent, then they can put him down as a first-time offender for a diuretic, and there's no issue. They conducted their own independent investigation because he tested positive in December, and they concluded that he was using it as a masking agent. That's where it becomes an issue, because the fact that he says he's taking it for a medical condition but won't release the medical condition, that screams guilty. This is the problem that I have with all of these major leaguers who get tested positive for a masking agent or for an unknown substance they say they're using for a quote-unquote medical condition. Tell us what the medical condition is. If you want us to fully believe you, be fully transparent. Don't hold things back. And it's because of that I think Cano is not going to be a soon Hall of Famer, a first ballot Hall of Famer. He may get in. I think eventually you'll see these steroid guys get in. Barry Bonds should 100% be in. I think Roger Clemens should 100% be in. Andy Pettitte is going to get in. These guys should be in. Mark McGwire maybe not, but Rafael Palmeiro maybe not. Shouldn't be in there. But Manny Ramirez should be in there when it comes his time. Mike Piazza, Pudge, and Jeff Bagwell, who are all going in this summer, part of that steroid era, but never really truly linked. And I just think that they eventually will let these guys in, and Robinson Cano will eventually be a Hall of Famer, although it's not going to be as easy as it was on Monday before this test, before this positive test came out. So it's going to be tough for him. As always, appreciate your guys' listener questions. You can always check us out on social media, PressRowPHM on Twitter and Instagram, PressRowPHM@gmail.com is the email. Find us on Facebook, Press Row Podcast by Public House Media. Find me as well at Chris Heimel, ChrasHeimal. One last thing I want to mention, I talked about it before the last break. There's a mental aspect in sports that's really interesting here, and it dooms a lot of teams. When you build yourself up so much, you have one specific goal in mind, and then you immediately see it crash down, it becomes a bigger mental hurdle than the actual physical one. For instance, the Toronto Raptors have always struggled against LeBron James. So when they lose game 1 like that, at home, on a buzzer beater, it deflates them so much that they can't get back up off the mat. It's a TKO. It is a Mike Tyson first punch to the jaw, game over type TKO. And it's happening with the Houston Rockets again. This Rockets team was built for one sole purpose, to beat Golden State. I talked about this last week. Mike D'Antoni was the coach for Steve Kerr's first year as a GM. They run the same style. Chris Paul was brought in just for this. Clint Capella was bred just for defending Andre Iguodala and Draymond Green. But when Kevin Durant goes off and you lose that badly at home and you look disinterested late in the fourth quarter at home, it is a knockout blow. It is just a devastating destruction. And I don't know why it happens. I don't understand it. I think a lot of it has to do with the coaching, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, there isn't that much in terms of adversity that these guys go through on the court because the talent isn't there across the board. All the best players are all playing together. So you're not going through those type of mental wars during the season. You're not, because, like the Warriors have said, it's all about the postseason for them. So they don't care that they lost 2 out of 3 in the regular season to Houston, because they know they can beat them in the playoffs. And when you have that mental edge, it's over. It's like the Patriots. As soon as you know Tom Brady's going to beat you, Tom Brady's beat you. So, big thanks to A.J. Perez, USA Today Sports, for joining us here talking about the Supreme Court ruling on PASPA. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, iTunes, Google Play, Spreaker.com. Check us out, thephmedia.com. Get some awesome Press Row swag. Until next time, guys, I'm Chris Sean. We appreciate you being part of the show, and I'll see you next week on Press Row.